Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening again. I want to welcome you guys back to the Conversation 98 and glad to be back on here and got some things straight. Had a little technical difficulties, but we right back on this thing. And I just want to thank you guys and show you that you guys know that you're so appreciated. Uh, and not only appreciated, I appreciate you. Um, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate the continued support and looking forward to another conversation, another episode, and 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 I look forward to today. I think today is going to be a good one, and looking forward to the dialogue and the conversations that we usually have. But all in all, man, I'm just grateful, glad, and thankful to be here. And not only that, though, I'm appreciative and appreciate my family. I just want to say I want to thank my family. I appreciate them, love them. And shout out to my son. Love my son, man. Thank you that he came up and even spending some time with his dad. It's been a blessing, truly a blessing to just have that time to spend time with him. Good old weather up here in northern New York. Hey, they said what spring, so we got lots of snow. Was shoveling some snow this morning. Was able to do some videography this morning, and excited about that project. Something I've been brewing for a few years, for a few years now. Finally got that going, and want to thank those volunteers, those that came out and volunteered, and not only volunteer, but uh, I really appreciate all of those who's helping making this come together. But with that being said, man, we're gonna go on and get into this conversation tonight. Make sure you let me know where you're tuning in from. Make sure you let me know where the conversations where you have uh, tune in. If you want to have a conversation, if you want to chat, if you want to whatever, just jump right on in. But for all this being said, here I go, man. We're gonna jump on in it, and truly excited about tonight and looking forward to the conversation. But tonight we're talking about how to deal with people who would never admit they're wrong or take ownership of their actions. And I'll tell you, one of the things is if you ever met somebody who is to themselves around them who is never wrong, like that's somebody that those people are very difficult to be around. Those people are very difficult to cohabitate with. Those people are very difficult to work with. Those people are very difficult to be friends with. Um, and it's just say, how do you deal with them? And a lot of times, some people they'll look at it and say, "Hey, I deal with them by not dealing with them." And you can avoid them. That can be an easy thing to do. Avoiding them can be very easy, but a lot of times, how do you deal with it? Because some situations, you may have somebody like that you work with in situation where you can't not deal with them. So how do you deal with them? And a lot of ways of dealing with them is, first of all, pray God for patience. Not saying you got to tolerate, but you're going to need patience. Like you're going to need patience, and not only just patience, man. When you also need understanding when you're dealing with people who don't who would never admit that they're wrong. We're all wrong. I don't care how you slice it. Everybody's wrong. We're all fine. Like we are all wrong multiple times, and it doesn't matter how you try to justify it. It doesn't matter how you try to what you call confirmation bias. It doesn't matter. None of that. We're all wrong. And we should be mature enough to admit when we're wrong, to admit when we fell short on things, instead of being someone who in their own mind, like I'm always right. You're not always right. And when you're like that, I'm telling you, you make life a living hell for people around you. But you're so self-centered that you don't even care how it impacting others. And that's a dangerous space to be in. Because when you're around those people, the reason a lot of times when you're around those people, they're intolerable because just of their arrogance. And their arrogance is because of their insecurities. Telling you that's what it is. And I don't care how they slice it, but that's what it is. People who are always tend to act like they're always right tend to be the most insecure people that you ever met, that you ever be around. They're so insecure. They're insecure and they want to feel like they're in control. And their bravado of being right is a coping mechanism to try to protect themselves from feeling vulnerable. So that's why to them they would never, like, they will always try to convince themselves that they're right because they feel inadequate on the inside. And I'm gonna just tell you that right there. And I don't care how somebody try to approach you with it. That is what that is. It is the root of that is they're afraid of feeling vulnerable. They're afraid of being exposed. So that's why they go around acting like they're always right, and they start exhibit narcissistic behavior simply because they are afraid of somebody realizing who they are and realizing that they don't want to feel vulnerable. That right there is what it is. And to be honest with you, it really don't matter. I mean, we run into a lot of those people. Many of us, we run into a lot of those people. Sadly, we do. But you know, a lot of people that don't like to be wrong or never admit that they're wrong or take ownership. The reason why they don't want to take ownership is because they are too afraid. Like they're just simply scared. And they try to mask it like they're strong. You see this big old, puffed up stuff like, oh, boom. They always, come at you aggressive. But the reality is those people are very scary. And they lack confidence. So they try to overcompensate with this I'm always right mentality. And those people are very, very difficult to cohabitate with. They're not only just cohabitate, those people are very difficult to be in relationships with, and they very difficult to work for because in their mind, they're never wrong. They always see things the way that they want it, right? And then they don't realize how much damage that they're causing. But the sad truth is many of them don't care because they don't want to relinquish their sense of control. Their sense of control. That's what they do. That's what a lot of them do. And that's a sad thing. Promise you, that's a sad thing. And I promise, y'all know somebody like that. And I'll tell you, if you know somebody like that, you realize that they're difficult. It's difficult to even be around or work with them or talk with them. It's difficult to deal with folks like that. It's difficult to deal with people who would just never admit that they're wrong. And I would tell you, it's not a natural. Nobody likes being wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not arguing the fact that somebody should like being wrong. What I am speaking on is being mature enough to recognize when you're wrong, right, and take ownership of your actions. A lot of people, a lot of relationships are destroyed simply because people don't want to admit and then take ownership. Because you got some people that admit they're wrong, but would never take ownership of what they did. And they'll try to justify it. They'll sit there and will try to justify it by somebody else's actions to justify them doing wrong because they are afraid to change or to adjust their behavior. And their behavior is what is wrong, not the other person. They're afraid to take ownership of it. And that's on them. When they're afraid to take ownership, that's on them. And sad truth is that's a lot of people that are like that. There are a lot of people who are out there like that. So we have to be able to take ownership of what we did. Other thing you can look at is one way of to deal with people who will never want to admit that they're wrong is you can avoid them. You can avoid them, especially if you don't have to deal with them. I can love you from a distance, but I can also recognize that you're ignorant. Being somebody who is never wrong or take ownership of their action is they distribute a lot of ignorant behavior and a lot of narcissistic behavior. And being around those people, a lot of times, if you don't have to be around them, you can remove yourself from them. But if you have to be around those people, you have to acknowledge, and not only acknowledge, but see the fact that what is causing them to be that way. And a lot of things that cause them to be that way is because they're scared and they're insecure. And they're afraid of being exposed. And that's on them. That's on them. And they are the ones that are going to have to deal with it. They're the ones that are going to, but a lot of them refuse to deal with it. But don't be afraid to go to them face forward and tell them about themselves. Don't do that. And one of the things that I've learned is people who are afraid to who would never admit that they're wrong or take ownership of their actions, they hate confrontation. That's why they are the ones that always try to be confrontational with others. They hate when somebody comes and hold them accountable and confront them on their behavior. They will try to wiggle around the accountability of it. They will try to find fault with other people. and they will sit there and not take ownership, but they'll try to blame everybody around them simply because they are afraid of dealing with themselves. And the fact is, that's on them. They're the ones they're the ones that, and in their mind, they're all good. Everything is good, but they don't even realize the chaos that they cause. They don't even realize that their kids ain't even their kids just waiting to leave their house and won't never come back and deal with them. And then they find themselves lonely later on in their life, wondering why the people ain't coming home. It's because of you and your ways, and you don't want to change and address or deal with it. And many times that's what we have to do. We have to be able to deal with it. We have to be able to sit down and talk about it. And we have to be willing to be an adult, to be mature enough to admit when we're wrong and take ownership of our actions. And what a lot of people don't realize is when we don't sit down and take ownership of our actions, one of the things people don't realize is that a lot of that translates from our childhood, and it roots back to the insecurities of some trauma in our childhood. Maybe you were never good enough when you was a child. Maybe you were hurt by somebody close to you. So in your mind, your coping mechanism, or you were never right to somebody that was in an authority figure in your life. So your coping mechanism was you were never going to be wrong. And you try to cover that up by creating this ideology, like the way that you think or the way that you approach everything is correct. And you do it in a sense to where you would not have it in any space where there's accountability. You will create a space to where it's always free and there's no accountability, because now you're afraid of accountability because that will trigger you from the trauma where you came from. And then you will sit around and you want people to see you in a light as if you in a position. And this is the thing. Many people that don't want to admit when they're wrong or take ownership of their actions always seek to be in a position of authority. They never want to sit under anybody. They never want to be under anybody. They never want to seek covering, because them seeking covering and submitting under somebody will force them to deal with themselves. They always want to push their ideology or push themselves or the way that they think on others and create a space where there's no accountability that come with it. So that no accountability that come with it, that's them justifying in a sense to try to justify why them being insecure. And the sad truth about that is those same people will continue to they will build up all of this rhetoric as if, hey, I'm good. But they just the same little boy or little girl who insecure and scared that somebody gonna find out about their flaws or their vulnerability. So that's why that they act the way that they do. And sadly, many of them will never admit that. They will never admit that. How you doing, Mama? Mama said, good evening. Good evening to you. Hey, Miss Bikes, how you doing? How you doing? Appreciate that. But just really like dealing with those people, and then one of the things about dealing with those people we have to look at is, in order to deal with people who never admit they wrong or take ownership, we got to take inventory of ourselves and see if we're willing to admit when we're wrong, and not just admit, but take ownership. Because many of us, we're acknowledging something does you no good if there's no change in behavior after. I can acknowledge I hurt you and still go and hurt you again. I can acknowledge I did you wrong and still do you wrong. But with the acknowledgement, where's the maturity at to where I take ownership of the things that I did wrong in my behavior? And a lot of what people try to do is they try to justify what they did based off of how they feel. And it's a dangerous space to be in, trying to justify what you did and not admit that you're wrong, because your feelings will always fool you. Your feeling was always feel or justify you feeling like you're right when you're wrong. And I'm telling you, your feelings, your emotions, that ain't a good thing, a good barometer to base anything off of. And listen, your emotions will fool you. Your emotions will let you down. Your emotions will have you thinking you're right when logically you're dead wrong. So it is not good to base your judgment off of how you feel or your emotions, because your emotions can easily be manipulated by your environment or any other factor. But logically, you sit down, if you know you did somebody wrong, admit it. Just, hey man, I did it. You know what I'm saying? And then take ownership. Because when you don't admit when you're wrong and you spend so much time trying to justify it, you waste so much time, energy, and effort trying to justify it instead of you just admitting that you're wrong and taking ownership and moving forward. And the sad truth is, so many relationships and situations would be healed if people just sat down and did that. But they refuse, and they go years of destruction because of it. I mean, years of destruction because of it. Because people refuse to admit that they did wrong to others. And I would tell you, you don't have to do that. It does not have to be that way. It does not, it does not have to take years of destruction to go on and destroy generations because people refuse to admit that what they did is wrong and take ownership of it, not just acknowledge it. Some of us, yes, we know that some situations may have led us, or some variables may have led us to do certain things that impacted somebody else. And you may have made the best decision that you made in that moment. Acknowledge all. But just because of that, that doesn't mean that the decision or something didn't do wrong by others. And I'm not saying that you didn't make that best decision, but what I am speaking towards is the fact that how it impacted somebody else, how it did wrong to somebody else. And there's nothing wrong with taking ownership of it and admitting that you're wrong and taking ownership. And don't try to put it off on the other people. Because when you try to put it off on the other people, that is so disrespectful to them, especially if you did them wrong. It's so disrespectful. And a lot of us do that to try to protect ourselves without even considering the other person. And, that's, some of us, I mean, many people do that. But, how do you deal with somebody who would never admit they're wrong? Some will say, some people will argue, hey, you don't deal with people, just let them go. Don't deal with folks when they are wrong. Let them go. Avoid them. But sometimes we can't. Sometimes we got to work with them. Sometimes we're living with them. Sometimes they're our parents. You see what I'm saying? How do you deal with them? Right? In some situations, some people would never change. And sometimes the best way of dealing with them is disconnection. And I'm not telling you this, and I'm not wanting this, but the reality is sometimes you have to disconnect from people, especially if they refuse to take ownership of something or admit that they're wrong and take ownership of something that caused you some discomfort or cause you some harm or cause you some trauma. You can approach them with it. If they're unwilling to accept it, you don't have to give them access to you after a certain point. And that goes to parents and child relationship. You don't have to give them access. You can love them from a distance, but you can hold them accountable by not giving them access to you. Mama said, and you're wrong doing it. Your wrongdoing is not justified because somebody did you wrong. Now, I love that, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because just because somebody did you wrong, that does not justify you doing somebody else wrong. That's not a justification of somebody doing you wrong. So I don't care how you slice it. I don't care how you want to talk about the trauma and the pain and the level of pain that it did to you. I'm not dismissive of it. But what I am saying is, because somebody else did you wrong, that does not justify you doing them or somebody else wrong. Because you try to get back at them. And I promise you, one thing that I've learned, and I appreciate God for this, is God not giving me a peace to deal with certain things. He's not giving me a peace to get back at certain people when I felt like, in a lot of ways, I was justified to do it. Sometimes legally. Sometimes I wanted to get back for my own self gratification. And by me doing that, God would never give me a peace. And every single time that I've done that, God has given me favor in those situations. He's given me favor in those situations. That doesn't mean I ain't want to get back at them. That does not mean that I ain't want to give them that work. That does not mean that I didn't have any anguish or frustration. That does not mean that. But what I am saying is just try to get back at somebody because they got some, or try to justify you doing somebody wrong because they did you wrong. You still got to be accountable for what you did. We all got to give accountability for it. And I know sometimes it seems hard because you just like, dang, man, why I got to do this? Why I got to do that? But that's not, I'm telling you, the reason why is because you're doing it for yourself. And, I want us to look at this is be careful not to let yourself feel like somebody's getting over on you because they did you wrong, and you're choosing to not put your time, energy, and effort to get back at them. Don't fall into that trap, because that trap of you getting back at them and you being petty and you doing all these things, you may feel like you win in the moment. You may feel like you win on the temporary side, but what you'll find out is you wasted a lot of time, energy, and effort and did a lot more irreconcilable damage in those situations just if you had just forgiven them, just moved on. And forgiveness doesn't mean that you lost. And a lot of people feel like if I forgive them, I'm losing. No, many times, most of the time, my forgiveness doesn't mean I got to reconnect with you. But my forgiveness is giving me that disconnect, so I'm not carrying that burden around with me, trying to get back at somebody. And I've learned to let that thing go in many situations. And at the end, I win. And in the end, I've won. I'm not just saying that. In the end, I have won. God has given me favor in those situations. And I'm not speaking from a place where I am not speaking from a place of where being unrealistic. Because some people, when they talk about this stuff, they want to be unrealistic. No, I'm speaking from a real human experience, like to the point where I'm speaking from a place where I'm speaking from a place where I felt like I was losing. It felt like somebody was getting over on me. It felt like somebody was taking advantage of me. It felt like I had a right to get back at them. I had a right to do the things to get back at them. I had a right to pursue this. I had a right to pursue that. And in all of those situations where I had a right, God never gave me a peace. But even if I did what I did, I was justified. But my motives was wrong. And that's what God was dealing with me with. And even in those situations, I'm going to tell you, in every situation that I found myself in those places like that, God will put you in a situation where those same people have to come back to you and ask you for help. They will have to come to you for help, or they'll come back to you and God will put you in a position where you will help them. And it's like, dang, and God end up doing that, and you sit there, and then the pettiness come in, where the realness come in, and you sitting there like, man, now look at you. Now you need my help. And then now what you say is, now you realize that, dang, they need your help, but then now you see, okay, now it's an opportunity for me to show grace. That doesn't come easy. And I'm not saying that I'm definitely not saying that that's easy. That's not something that you wake up in the morning and you're smiling about and you're saying, hey, Lord, I'm blessed and highly favored and I feel good. No, that is not it. Because you want to get back at people. You want people to feel the way that you feel. That's a natural feeling, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I'm telling you, don't get into that pettiness of trying to get back at folks because they did you wrong. You're going to have to pay for what you did. You're going to have to pay for that. So no matter how you feel about it, no matter how you try to dress it up or dress it down, you will have to give an account for how you are. And I will tell you this. If you are a person that it's hard for you to admit that you're wrong and you try to find ways to justify what you did or try to justify you being in your wrong, you're exhibiting to the world that you are a very insecure person. You're exhibiting to the world that you are afraid of feeling vulnerable. You're exhibiting to the world that you are disconnected from reality. because we all do wrong. We all have done wrong. We all do wrong by others. We all make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. Don't try to sit around and do this lame attempt to justify all that we are perfect, or I do what I need to do based off of this. No, ain't no justification in there. You're just telling the world, hey, world, look at me. I'm insecure. I don't want anybody to know that I feel vulnerable. And I'm going to try to protect myself from being exposed. That's what it is. William McGraw, how you doing? He said, what goes around comes around no matter what. You are 100% correct. And a lot of times, that's why I say when we get it, we get it. And I thank you for that. I thank you for that. I really thank you for that. You know, what goes around comes around. It does. The problem is we want to expedite that. And it ain't our role to expedite karma, how we say karma coming back to somebody else. You know, karma's coming back to somebody else. And I'm speaking from a Christian perspective. You know, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. That's what the Bible says. And that teaching, that doesn't mean that I don't do things to protect myself. But a lot of the things I want people to understand is God don't need your help. And what we try to do is we try to justify, try to assist God in a way of us getting back at other people. Because I'm telling you, what I've learned in my experience is God will work on your heart in those situations to where he'll give you compassion and give you grace in your heart towards those same people and put you in a position to where you are the one that say, hey, look, nah, don't come too hard on them right now. Because that's what God do. But see, us in our own flesh, what we do, we burn, baby, burn. Hey, burn, baby, burn. In a way of like, we try to vindicate ourselves, but no, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And when we get involved and we try to operate in that, we try to do those things in our own strength, what we do is we welcome chaos into our own life. And we invite karma to come back on us. And now we wonder why we stuck and we in these situations. Man, I hope you guys had a great and wonderful day. I really appreciate you guys rocking with me. Again, man, celebrating people, man, love on people in your life. And you know, if you find yourself in a position where you got to deal with people, somebody who would never admit that they're wrong, right? Realize that it's something wrong with them. A lot of times they need counseling. A lot of times, many times that comes from undealt with trauma that they try to justify to themselves that they're okay with, but it's not. And that's where it comes from. Just somebody that just can't be wrong. And we all know that we are flawed. We all know that we are not perfect. We all know we make mistakes, even with our best intentions. But you can't admit when you're wrong and then take ownership of what you did. That's something learned as a child. And if you're a grown and adult person and you're struggling with that, man, you need to get some help. Like, for real. Because the reality is nobody wants to be around you. People are around you because they have to. And if you don't change, you will die lonely. That's just what it is. You can like it or not, but you will die lonely. And that will be all because of the decisions and the choices you made. Man, you guys have a great and wonderful week. I appreciate you more than you know. Hey, go check me out. Go check me out on the social media platforms. Definitely, hey, Miss Jones, I definitely will make it shareable. It should be able to share, but I'll make sure it's shareable. I'll send it to you so you can share it. But make sure you go check out my social media platforms at The Conversation 98 on YouTube, The Conversation 98 on TikTok, at 98 Conversation on Twitter, The Conversation 98 on here, and at The Conversation _98 on TikTok. Hey, you guys have a great, wonderful week. Share this with somebody, and you guys be blessed. God bless.